Hello and welcome to Class 15. Today we're going to be covering diseases. Take it away, Amy.
So the first disease we're going to talk about is Alzheimer's disease, and it's actually a neurodegenerative disease. And that's kind of like a fancy word, but what it's basically saying is that it's affecting your brain, it's affecting your neurons. And typical symptoms or typical signs that you have that kind of disease is your memory is decaying, it's hard for you to learn new things, and most of your brain functions basically shut down. And it's actually a really deadly type of disease because it's affecting your brain, right? And your brain is the most important organ in your body. So most of them are lethal. So not only are they hard to treat, you also will probably die if you contract this kind of disease. Next slide, please. So here are some basic statistics. It's the sixth leading cause of death in the United States, and 1/3 of Americans over age 85 are afflicted with the illness. Basically, this means that as you're growing older, you are more likely to have this disease. And it's not necessarily genetic. There are some people, some scientists that say or that believe that if your parents have it, you'll also have it. That's not always true. Most of the time, it just comes with old age. And it affects 44 million people internationally. So you can see it's a huge disease. And one of the things people don't actually think about when they think about disease is how big of a financial burden is, because that's affecting 44 million people. And that's not just like that amount of people that are being taken out of the economy. It's also people who are working to treat them or working to take care of them. All of those people are now dedicated to helping this disease. And they're putting all their energy into this disease where they could be doing it into something else. And this disease, like I said before, it's characterized by severe memory loss, difficulty learning, and mood swings. So you might not think about this, but your brain is also controlling your mood. It's controlling your emotions. So when you have this kind of huge disease that's affecting your brain, your mood and your emotions are going to change a lot. People who usually have this disease will become more irritable, more angry, more annoyed at small things than they were before. Next slide. So here you can see actually this picture where you can see as a healthy brain, a mild stage brain, which is like the mid stage, and then severe. And you can see actually the brain is like getting smaller because those little crevices or those like holes in the brain are getting bigger. So your brain tissue is actually like decreasing, it's disappearing. And you can see now why this would be horrible and why you have such like strong, intense symptoms. And the way people can actually test for Alzheimer's, they're not great because there's a lot of different diseases that are similar to Alzheimer's. Like I said before, pretty much any neurodegenerative disease will have similar symptoms, but they usually test for them with memory tests. So, like, they'll literally just ask you, hey, do you remember this thing? Or, like, they'll have some sort of standard test to test your memory. They'll have brain scans. So, like, they'll put you under some machine and they'll take a picture of your brain. They have genetic testing. This is like super uncertain. It'll just test if you have a mutation, and that won't really tell you anything. It'll just say, hey, if you have children and your husband or your spouse also has this gene, then you might have a child who will also have Alzheimer's. And it's really not certain. It's pretty imprecise. And then the other testing is blood tests. And these are super new. I think they came out in like January. And they're really promising because they're super cheap and they might be really precise. So, unlike all those other methods that we've discussed before. And then treatment. So, like I said before, Alzheimer's is super deadly. There's no actual way to treat it so far. It's mainly like if you're in the first stages, the early stages, then they can give you medication that can slow down your symptoms. It can make you forget things slower, but ultimately you're still going to, lose your brain mass and then die. So they're figuring out promising new ways to, not just like treat the symptoms. Like if you're treating a cold, you're not just treating your sneeze or your cough or your sore throat. You're actually treating the root cause. So they're actually trying to figure out, why did your brain shrink over time and what can we do to stop that?
Alright, I'm gonna be talking about polio, and it's this disease that cripples people. Alright, next slide. Alright, so what is polio? Polio is an infectious disease that's caused by the polio virus. So it was a big deal in like the 20th century, in like the 1950s, because there was no vaccine for it. Now there's like vaccines for it, so no one's really worried about it. But back then it was a very dangerous disease. So it's an infectious disease that didn't have a lot of symptoms, which I will cover in the next slide. So that made it really easy to, transfer to other people. And then it caused a very infamous epidemic in the United States. Alright, so some symptoms of polio are fatigue, fainting, muscle weakness, or quiver, which basically is like sort of like mild paralyzation, headaches, nausea, and slow growth. Right, so this disease is very infamous and dangerous because of its effects on a very small percentage of the victims. So to 0.5% of its victims, the polio virus moves up from the gut into the central nervous system, which is the basically the body system that controls everything you do. And then it caused muscle weakness, which resulted in a flaccid paralysis. So this caused paralysis in different parts of the body. So depending on which part of the body got paralyzed, different effects happened. So some people got paralyzed in like their chest and their lungs, so they couldn't breathe. That forced them to live in these iron lung things, as you can see on the top right. Basically, they're machines that help you breathe. And so, yeah.
Hello, and I'm going to be covering the measles section of these slides. Next slide, please. So, what is measles? Or at least this is going to be a general overview of what measles is. Measles is a an infection of which is caused by a virus. It is extremely dangerous to children and is quite common and was quite common in the past and killed many people. However, due to our vaccine, we have limited the spread of measles and have stopped it from, we have basically banished it from our minds, and we don't really worry about measles that much nowadays. But still, this virus still does kill a lot of people, especially in poorer countries. This virus has killed more than about 100,000 people per year, and most of these deaths have been from children who are under the age of 5, meaning that this virus, though it might not be a big problem to many adults, it is still an extremely big problem to the younger generation, due to the fact of which the younger generation has actually a vastly worse immune system compared to the older generations. Next slide. Now, I'm now going to cover the symptoms and some of the signs of which come with measles. These symptoms usually appear actually around 10 to 14 days after you get the virus. These symptoms include a fever. This is actually usually depends on what stage you're in. I'll cover that later, but it spans from either a small, mild, or even a high fever. You will also have a dry cough. You have runny nose. You have sore throats. You also have inflamed eyes, basically meaning watery eyes. If you've ever had allergies, it's kind of close, not as close as it is to allergies. However, it's kind of a good example to make, because maybe not, but you can basically, it's generally around the same thing as what watery eyes is. It's pretty close. However, it does hurt a lot more than watery eyes would usually happen. Next, you also begin to get tiny white spots with blue/white centers, with red backgrounds inside the mouth or on the inner lining of the cheek, also called Kopflik spots. I can't really pronounce that, sorry. And of course, you have the telltale rash, which it makes up a large portion of your body and are big, flat blotches, often that flow into one another, usually showing the virus's progression throughout your body. The please do not switch the slide. Basically, with these tiny white spots, what will happen is they will appear. I'm going to cover some of these symptoms right now. So I'm covering Koplik spots. Conflict spots, this usually, as I've already mentioned, this appears in your mouth. What with this usually causes like bumps, white spots, and this is kind of like the skin rash of which appears on your skin. However, in this case, conflict spots are more like the skin rash for the inside of your body, if that makes any sense. That's because the skin rashes on your body, or at least on the outside skin, that is basically an indicator of where the measles virus is within your body, or at least how far it has progressed within your body. So what I mean by this is that the measles virus will slowly spread throughout your body as your immune system as it progresses, and your immune system will slowly try to fight it. The measles virus will then create these rashes throughout your body, and when it reaches your mouth, head, that sort of area, what will happen is that in your mouth you will start getting those spots, as I've already mentioned, signifying that I believe it has reached your cavity area. Cavity area. I think that's how you pronounce. That's the medical term. Now, as I've already mentioned, the skin rash is a indicator as to where the measles body virus is. So the measles virus is extremely infectious, and what will basically happen with the skin rash is that it will start at one certain point. If you've not, I don't think many people here have actually gotten measles, but basically what will happen with measles is it will start out as a small rash, maybe in a certain part of the body, and from there it will slowly spread and spread and spread throughout your body until it covers a lot of your body from head to toe. And as it slowly spreads, as I've already mentioned, that is basically an indicator of how far the measles virus has spread throughout the body. Because as the measles virus goes and as the immune system is fighting it, these virus and rash spots just pop up throughout your body. Next slide. Now, I have mentioned the steps of measles. Now let me get in depth. So when you're from the first point of infection, it usually takes about 10 to 14 days before the real symptoms of the virus show. So if I get infected, let's say on a Sunday, it could take, actually, no, not, let's not do day names. Let's say I get infected on May 1st. Let's say I get infected on May 1st. It'll sometimes take me to maybe even May 10, 11, all the way to possibly even May 15th till I start showing symptoms of the actual virus. And that is basically the incubation stage of the virus. That from around 10 to 14 days is usually how long it takes for the virus to incubate and fully basically grow until the immune system at least starts to notice it and starts trying to fight back at least. And after your immune system starts to notice it, it will the virus will already have gotten to the second stage. The second stage is where there's a mild fever, cough, runny nose, sore throat, and that all occurs at stage 2. So the mild fever, it's mild. It's not very high. It's not. I don't. It's around. It's. I don't think. I don't think it's above 100, but I think it is around there. Starting off with the cough. The cough is usually, I do believe it is a dry cough. I believe it is a dry cough, and along with that, you will get some runny nose and a sore throat. This is due to the measles virus maybe mainly infecting your throat area, and that will mainly cause the cough and the sore throat. And from there, it'll also cause a runny nose. Stage 3. This usually occurs around 2 to 3 days after stage 2. So after you get your mild fever and your cough, runny nose, that sort of stuff, that mild fever after 2 to 3 days will start to turn into a very high fever, sometimes reaching up to temperatures of around 104 degrees, which is quite high. That mild fever will also be coming with the telltale rash, of which I have mentioned. That rash, of course, as I've explained in quite detail, is how the virus is basically spreading throughout your body. That virus, the rash will then begin to appear throughout and start spreading from a singular point outwards. Also, please do note the virus is transmissible before you even start showing symptoms. Uh, Supposedly, even 8 days before from the point of infection, you will start showing symptoms. That means I could have zero cough, zero fever, no runny nose, nothing. I could be like that for basically 8 days straight 8 days straight. And at the start of the eighth day, it is generally thought that the virus is transmissible from there all the way until the end, which is, according to some research, the end of the measles virus actually occurs 4 days after, I think it's 4 days after the rash breaks out. So that's the general estimate. Sometimes some statistics do say different. However, the general agreed upon statistic, according to the site of which I have researched on, it says around 4 days after the outbreak of the rash, you will either be cured or, yeah. Next slide, please. So, complications after measles. What do I mean by complications? First of all, complications are basically the, how should I put this? Complications are basically what happens after, the aftershocks of of measles. So just like how after an earthquake hits, tsunamis may hit after it, after measles hit, these symptoms may appear. So the symptoms of which follow measles most commonly are ear infections. Usually, this is because there might be some pustules deep within the ear, causing ear infections. So, since the ear isn't really since the ear isn't really that well, how should I put this? Since the ear isn't really that open of an area and you can't really see it that well or even interact with that well, if there's pustules within the ear and they basically pop, what may happen is that those pustules deep within the ear might get infected, causing an ear infection, as said here. What you also might get is bronchitis. This, I do believe, according to the site of which I read, basically you're gonna get um, it happens with your throat basically, and you also get pneumonia in some cases if you've already had a weak in some cases due to the measles being such a devastating virus for the immune system. These the ammonia of which you do get could be extremely dangerous to your body and could also lead to your possible death if your immune system was weakened enough by the measles virus. You also get encephalitis. This usually has to deal with, yet again, some more measles stuff, especially to do with the lungs. Next, finally, you also have pregnancy problems. This only applies to pregnant women, and what may happen is problems with the baby and such. Now, before we finish up, I'm going to say this: the measles virus is a vaccinatable virus. Basically, it has a vaccine for it. There's a reason why the measles virus has really taken a back seat over these past couple of years. It's mainly because the vaccine has become extremely widespread throughout the United States. And so the virus has gone from almost everybody fearing it to nobody fearing it, or at least within the US, that is. The virus is extremely contagious. However, due to the vaccinations of which we have created for it, it has gone way down in its severity. What has happened with the virus is that because we have the vaccination, the virus will then not be able to really infect the person of which has a vaccine. Now, let me get on to a quick side note about vaccines and that sort of thing. With diseases, you usually have vaccines, or at least some sort of treatment for them. Some diseases do not have treatments. These are extremely dangerous diseases. We have nicknamed them superbugs, by the way. Superbugs are diseases of which are, I do believe, don't have a vaccine, or at least are resistant to most, if not all, antibiotics of which we have. Antibiotics are uh, basically, they're the drugs of which we use to combat diseases. And so, basically, these superbugs, they are immune to everything, basically, and they are extremely dangerous to us. However, the measles virus is not a superbug. It can be easily vaccinated and can be easily treated if you take the precautionary measures to do so. The virus is very preventable and and you can be extremely safe from it if you do take the vaccine. The vaccine will not only protect you, but also the people around you. So, for example, let's say your friend isn't vaccinated, but you are vaccinated. That basically reduces for your friend. It reduces the risk of the threat of the measles virus to him because now one person, let's say he had 10 people which were close friends of him, always saw him, and let's say 9 of them were vaccinated. Now, he would that would basically mean 9 of his 10 people, of his 10 close friends, now they don't have the measles virus, or at least they are extremely resistant to the measles virus. That would basically tell him that only one of his 10 friends can give him the measles virus. In which case he might just tell that 10th friend, please go get a measles virus vaccine. What the measles virus vaccine does is it creates herd immunity. That term basically refers to the fact that multiple people have an immunity to a certain type of virus, leading to people within the community. So, for example, the elderly, immunocompromised people, or some even children, these specific groups, they are protected from the virus due to the fact that everybody surrounding them can't give them the virus, because how viruses work is usually they're given to you by someone else, and if you don't have contact with somebody else, you usually don't get the virus. Thank you for that quick side note. We can now move on to the next slide, which will be covering the flu.
The next disease we're gonna be talking about is the flu. So what is the flu? The official name for the flu is influenza, and it's a seasonal disease. Like once every year, like a lot of people start getting it, and that's known as flu season. It's a very common viral infection, and a lot of people get it, but it's not like very dangerous. So it attacks the lungs, nose, and throat, and you get it by through tiny droplets, mostly from people who already have it, and like their cough and stuff affect you. It's usually not deadly, but it can also be deadly, so you can die if you get it.
Around 8% of the US population gets infected each year during flu season, and children are most likely to get it with 65-year-olds and above, least likely to get the flu. And the best way to prevent it is by getting the vaccine. So there's a lot of symptoms that come with the flu, and they tend to show up 2 days after you get infected. And you don't get all of them, but like they do show up. So you can get like fever or like a lot of coughing, and then sore throat, runny or stuffy nose, muscle aches, headaches, fatigue, and then for children, it's vomiting and diarrhea. So an event that happened in 1918 was the Spanish flu. So it was a type of avian flu that spread worldwide due to World War One, and over 500 million people, which was at that time a third of the world population, were infected, where 50 million people died. So that's like 10%. And then with 675,000 people dying in the US. That's it. Yeah.
Stomach cancer. What is stomach cancer? Stomach cancer is cancer that occurs in the stomach. Risk factors that may include smoking and a diet of highly processed or salty foods. There may be no symptoms of stomach cancer early on. Later, symptoms include feeling bloated after eating, feeling full after eating small amounts of food, nausea, heartburn, or indigestion. Treatment options include surgery, medication, radiation, and chemotherapy. All right, so treatment options include surgery, medication, radiation, and chemotherapy. None of these are surefire treatments, but they are some options for if you have stomach cancer. Life expectancy for stomach cancers. For localized stomach cancer, you usually have a 5-year relative survival rate of 70%. For regional stage, you have 32% chance of 5-year relative survival rate. Distant is 6%, and all of the stages combined would be 32%. So lung cancer. Lung cancer symptoms and causes. Symptom: coughing up blood, wheezing, shortness of breath, weight loss, weakness, fever, fingernail clubbing, chest pain, bone pain, superior vena cava obstruction, or difficulty swallowing. If cancer expands into airways, it could cause pneumonia. Causes: long-term smoking, genetics, radon gas, air pollution, asbestos.